For over 100,000 years, ice sheets nearly 2 miles thick buried entire continents. Average temperatures dropped by as much as 15 degrees, and somewhere in the middle of all that, a soft-skinned, slow, weaponless primate walked straight through it and came out the other side. No fur, no claws, no natural defense against freezing to death, and somehow, we're still here to talk about it. By almost every logical measure, humans should not have survived the Ice Age. We weren't the strongest species on the planet, we weren't the fastest, we didn't have thick fur, sharp claws, or the ability to hibernate through the worst of it. Species far better equipped for extreme cold, woolly mammoths, cave bears, entire lineages of megafauna went extinct during this same period. So today, we're looking at exactly how ancient humans pulled off one of the most unlikely survival stories in our entire history, and it comes down to a handful of very specific adaptations that frankly shouldn't have been enough. But they were. The most recent Ice Age, technically called the last glacial period, peaked around 20,000 years ago, and it wasn't just cold, it was a completely different planet. Massive ice sheets covered huge portions of North America, Europe, and Asia, some of them nearly 2 miles thick. Sea levels dropped dramatically, low enough to expose entire land bridges that don't exist today. Vast stretches of the planet that currently support forests and farmland were instead frozen tundra or barren steppe, hostile to almost anything trying to survive on them. For early humans, this meant the world they knew was constantly shrinking and shifting. Regions that had supported life for generations could become unlivable within a human lifetime. Food sources moved, disappeared, or became seasonal in ways that made survival unpredictable year to year. And this wasn't a challenge humans faced for a few rough winters. This was tens of thousands of years of sustained, brutal environmental pressure, generation after generation, with functionally zero modern tools to fall back on. So the first real question is simple. With no natural fur, how did a species built for warm African plains survive temperatures that killed off far tougher animals? The answer is clothing. And it might be one of the underrated inventions in human history. Genetic studies on body lice, which only live in clothing, not directly on skin, suggest humans started wearing clothes somewhere between 80,000 and 170,000 years ago, giving us a rough timeline for when this adaptation actually began. Early clothing wasn't just draped animal hide thrown over the shoulders. Archaeological evidence, including bone needles dating back over 40,000 years, shows that early humans were actually sewing fitted, tailored garments designed specifically to trap body heat and block wind far more effectively than loose fur ever could. This mattered enormously because effective clothing meant humans could push into colder regions that our bodies alone never could have handled. Fitted layers, insulated footwear, and weatherproofed outer shells allowed early humans to push into colder regions our bodies alone never could have handled. In a very real sense, clothing became a second skin, an artificial adaptation that let us cheat evolution and survive conditions our actual bodies were never built for. But clothing alone wasn't enough, because surviving an Ice Age night required something clothing alone could never provide: fire. Not fire as a convenience, fire as an absolute survival requirement. By the time the worst of the Ice Age hit, humans weren't just occasionally using fire, they had become completely dependent on it. Fire provided warmth. Cold nights would have made survival nearly impossible without it. It allowed meat to be cooked, which mattered enormously in freezing environments where every available calorie counted, and cooking made food far more calorie efficient to digest. It kept dangerous predators, many of which were also struggling to survive the same brutal conditions, at a safer distance, and it provided light during incredibly long winter nights in high-latitude regions, some of which experienced only a few hours of daylight at certain points in the year. Archaeological sites from this period show hearths built directly inside caves and shelters, sometimes with evidence of continuous, carefully maintained fires that appear to have burned for extended stretches of time. This wasn't casual fire use, this was survival infrastructure, something communities depended on and actively protected. Without reliable fire, it's genuinely difficult to imagine humans surviving the coldest, darkest stretches of the Ice Age at all. Comment below what you think would have been hardest to deal with personally, the cold itself or the darkness. Clothing and fire solved the immediate survival problem, but they couldn't fix everything because some regions eventually became so hostile that staying put simply wasn't an option anymore. This is where migration comes in, and it's a bigger part of the story than most people realize. As ice sheets expanded and swallowed up livable land, and as food sources shifted or disappeared entirely, human populations were forced to move, sometimes across enormous distances, in search of environments that could still support life. This constant pressure to relocate is a major reason humans ended up spreading across so much of the planet during this era. Populations pushed into new territories, adapted to radically different environments, and in some cases crossed land bridges that only existed because sea levels had dropped so dramatically during the Ice Age itself, including the land bridge connecting Asia and North America. Migration wasn't a single dramatic journey, it was a slow, constant, multi-generational process of small groups pushing outward, searching for livable land, and adapting to whatever environment they eventually found themselves in. Some groups thrived in cold, resource-scarce tundra environments. Others found more stable conditions further south and settled for extended periods. This willingness, or honestly this necessity to keep moving, is a huge part of why humans didn't just survive the Ice Age in one isolated location. We ended up spreading across nearly the entire planet because of it. And that constant movement into wildly different environments forced something else to happen, something that might be the single biggest reason we made it through at all. Adaptation, not slow, evolutionary physical adaptation. There simply wasn't enough time for that on this scale. Behavioral and technological adaptation, which turned out to be dramatically faster and more flexible. Humans who migrated into colder regions developed increasingly specialized tools for that specific environment, more efficient hunting weapons, better shelters, improved methods for preserving food through brutally long winters. Groups in different regions developed different strategies entirely, based on whatever local resources happened to be available to them. This flexibility is arguably humanity's greatest survival advantage then, and honestly still today. We couldn't grow thicker fur in a few generations the way some Ice Age animals managed to, but we could invent warmer clothing almost immediately. We couldn't hibernate through brutal winters, but we could build better fires, better shelters, and store food more effectively to get through them. Species like the woolly mammoth and cave bear were incredibly well adapted to cold environments, biologically speaking, but they were also relatively inflexible once conditions shifted dramatically. Humans, on the other hand, could completely reinvent our entire survival strategy within a single generation if the environment demanded it. That single trait, the ability to adapt quickly through behavior, tools, and culture instead of waiting on slow biological evolution, may be the single biggest reason you exist to watch this video at all. Every person alive today is a direct descendant of humans that found a way through 100,000 years of ice, cold, and constant, unrelenting pressure to disappear. If you want more videos digging into how ancient humans actually survived, not the sanitized textbook version, the real one, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making these. And let me know in the comments of everything covered in this video, clothing, fire, migration, or adaptation, which do you think mattered the most? I'll see you in the next one.